So here tonight on Yowie for just probably as long as anybody wants to hang around and ask a question. So I guess we got a first question here. In the course of the evening, I hope to interject everything it is that I've been doing and saying throughout the campaign. I am Gary Johnson. I'm a Republican candidate for president, trying to get that nomination. And I think I'll start it out with defining or saying what my political philosophy is. My political philosophy is that I'm a classical liberal. If you Wikipedia classical liberal, what you're going to read is that a classical liberal is somebody who believes in less government. A classical liberal is somebody who believes that the best thing that government can do for you and I as individuals is to empower you and I as individuals to make the choices that I think only you and I should make. That so oftentimes government criminalizes behavior that really might just be bad decision making, but it certainly, in my opinion, should be a freedom that you and I could enjoy. For example, like marijuana. So many people in this country smoke marijuana, and although others may view that as a bad choice, it is anything, in my opinion, but criminal. So first 100 days as president, what specifically do you plan to do in your first 100 days as president? I'm making 3 promises running for president of the United States. One promise is to submit a balanced budget to Congress. I'm going to do this because I believe that the country is on the verge of a monetary collapse. What's a monetary collapse? Well, that was Russia in the 80s. It's when the currency isn't worth anything. And given the fact that over the last year, up to 70% of the money that we're using to pay ongoing government expenses was printed, we need to stop printing money. So balancing the budget puts a stop to printed money. That's promise number 1. Promise number 2 is I promise to veto any expenditures that exceed revenue. Now, you can argue that by doing those 2 things, Congress will simply override my veto, which is true, but under the scenario that I just laid out, I think spending will be less than any other scenario that you could possibly be presented with. The third thing that I'm promising to do as President of the United States is advocate on the part of throwing out the entire federal tax system and replacing it with the fair tax. For those watching, get online, check out fairtax.org. This has been a proposal that's been around since 2007. It was a House bill, but it is, as the name implies, it's fair. It throws out the entire federal tax system, so no more income tax, no more business tax, no more corporate tax, no more IRS, no more withholdings from your paycheck. Social Security match from your employer, Medicare, unemployment will come out of the fair tax. The fair tax is a 23% consumption tax that, among other things, because there would be no corporate income tax, if that doesn't reboot the American economy to put the private sector in a position to hire tens of millions of people, I don't know what will actually get tens of millions of people hired. There are a lot of caveats that go along with the fair tax as we go along this evening. Questions concerning the fair tax, I'll be glad to address any and all of those as they come up. Let's see, if you don't get the nomination, will you consider running in the general election as a third-party candidate? You know, my intention, I am not sitting here believing that I still can't win the Republican nomination. I know that sounds kind of crazy, but it's what I believe. I think if there's anything we've seen over the last several months, it's that candidates with the Republican Party come under the spotlight and it's this, and then the next day it's this. and I mean this. So I'm hoping to get the light shined on what it is that I'm saying, and I think that it's going to turn out well. I'm still laboring under the belief that this is all going to turn out. And running for governor of New Mexico, third party, you know what? You can make some great statements, but running within the two-party system, you've got a chance of getting elected. And having been elected governor of New Mexico for 2 terms, I think I really made a positive difference in New Mexico. And that's what I'm trying to bring to this equation, is to actually get elected and bring the viewpoint of less government and also the notion of increased liberties and freedoms, which is, in my opinion, what this country's always been about. Would you support a return to a gold or commodity-based currency standard? Yes, I would. I think that that would be very positive, and I understand the whole notion of competing currencies and how you could bring about a change from paper currency to commodity-based, and I think that would be very, very positive for the currency. The way the currency started out, it would bring increased value to the dollar as opposed to what we're facing, which is a monetary crisis where, hey, today our dollars are worth something and tomorrow they're not, and that's just how quickly it happens. Okay, so video caller, Andrew Hart.
Hello, how are you?
Great.
Well, my question was, given your experiences in this campaign, have you given any thought to campaign or finance reform?
You know, Andrew, the only thing I think is needed when it comes to campaign finance reform is just complete transparency. The notion that right now you could have, let's just say Coca-Cola could give $1 million to a candidate, and rather than giving them that $1 million directly and having that $1 million attributed to Coca-Cola, they could give it to the Republican National Committee, which could then turn around and give it to the candidate in other ways. I don't think that that's right at all. I've said this tongue-in-cheek, but I think candidates should be required to wear a jacket similar to NASCAR drivers with patches on, or logos on the jacket, commensurate with the amount of money that they received from the corporations. Right now we have super PACs, which allow for third parties to be able to influence elections without actually going through the candidate, him or herself. Again, this is not as transparent, not transparent in many cases at all, and it should be. So, Niles, go ahead and echo your question.
Well, my main question was, you have on numerous times stated that you would pardon all nonviolent drug offenders like marijuana offenders that are currently serving prison sentences. Well, I am myself no longer in the system, but I am a marijuana felon, nonviolent, and I was wondering if you would also extend that pardon to us, so that way we could have a clear record and no longer have to deal with like the discrimination we do face, like with like with jobs and also like with housing, school loans, stuff like that. So I was wondering if you would pardon us as well.
So Niles, as governor of New Mexico, this was something that I did. This is unofficial, but I think I issued at least 100 pardons of the kind that you're talking about. Individuals like yourself who have served the sentence for a crime committed, and in this case, the criteria was not drug offenses associated with other crime, but very simply drug offenses. And I think that needs to be a part of this process. Niles, I think you might be one of 30 million Americans
I believe it.
And I don't know your specific situation. Was it a felony?
Yeah, I have a Class 3 felony for simple possession alone.
So I think you may be one of 30 million Americans. I think 15 million of those Americans are that would apply to marijuana. That needs to be part of this process, is to get 30 million people back on track, get 30 million people that are being denied the freedoms, the opportunities that everybody else has. So absolutely, I did it as governor. That needs to be a part of this process. I also put it out in New Mexico that when it came to nonviolent drug offenders, possession users in jail, that I would actually commute sentences for those in jail. It turns out that that population really exists in federal prison, not in state prison, although I was able to commute 2 sentences of individuals in prison for really use only.
Cool. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Best of luck to you.
Zach, your mic might be broken. Let me read your question. How would your plans for education affect state universities and student loans and grants? Zachary, my plans don't include doing anything when it comes to student loans. What I would like to point out is that I think the reason for the higher costs in higher education rest with the fact that you as a student, tuition is getting high, and that rather than making a decision to not attend higher education because it costs so much, you're making a decision to take out a loan because government guarantees student loans. I maintain that because there are those student loans available and that they're guaranteed, that right now that this is a unique kind of a situation where kids right now, yourself, are graduating from college and you're literally strapped with a home mortgage for the rest of your life, that there is no escaping that home mortgage. I'm a believer in free markets. I just suggest to you that if student loans did not exist, and I am not advocating that with regard to the federal government, but if student loans did not exist, I think tuition would be a lot lower because colleges and universities want to deliver their product, and if there weren't as many kids going to school because it costs too much, they would find ways to lower their price. But they haven't met that necessity. They don't see that as a necessity because all of you can get student loans, hence the enormously high cost of higher education in lieu of everything else where you see goods and services, the cost of goods and services dropping. So, Ryan, you're up.
Hey, my question is, well, first of all, you have my support as well as my fault, but a lot of these promises can actually be kept, or should we be voting for more than just our question?
I think you need to really speak right into your microphone. We can hear you, but not as good as we should. Oh, so read it. All right, will do. You have my support as well as Dr. Paul does, but how can y'all keep promises that Congress won't allow? Ryan, getting back to my promises, I promised to submit a balanced budget to Congress. That doesn't mean Congress is going to accept the balanced budget, but I promised to submit one. So that means a document that is going to be incredibly scrutinized. How is it? Because that's a document that's going to have to be a document that's going to basically detail how to cut 43% from federal government. I promise to do that. Now, Congress, I don't think they're going to pass it. I don't think they are. I think they're going to pass legislation where spending exceeds revenue. My second promise is to veto legislation where expenses exceed revenue. I just suggest to you that my doing that, my submitting what is a balanced budget, vetoing legislation that doesn't balance the budget, that even if Congress overrides, that budget will have less spending in it than any other scenario that you can possibly present to me, and you can come back on later on if you think of a scenario where spending would be lower. And I'll adopt that. Dan, you're up.
What's your stance on overseas intervention?
Just generally speaking, we shouldn't be intervening in other countries' affairs. I was opposed to Iraq before we went into Iraq. I did not see a military threat from Iraq. I think we have the military surveillance capability to see that kind of thing happening, a military threat. And if it happens, we can deal with it. But there needs to be a military threat. I didn't see it in Iraq, and I thought if we went into Iraq, we would find ourselves in a civil war to which there would be no end. Afghanistan, I thought that was completely warranted. We were attacked. We attacked back. But after having been in Afghanistan for 6 months, we wiped out Al-Qaeda. That was 10 years ago. So we're building roads, schools, bridges, highways, and hospitals in Iraq and Afghanistan and other parts of the world, and we're borrowing 43 cents out of every dollar, borrowing and printing money to the tune of 43 cents out of every dollar. I think that's crazy. Let's get out of Iraq, get out of Afghanistan. I also would not have been involved in Libya and issued a paper regarding Libya. Where in the Constitution does it say that because we don't like a foreign leader, we should go in and topple that foreign leader? Haven't we injected ourselves in a civil war in Libya? Don't 5 other countries in the Middle East qualify for that same intervention? What is the outcome going to be? Obviously, we're going to pick a winner, and we'll see how that turns out 15 or 20 years from now. And Mubarak was just overthrown, and this is somebody that we picked as a winner. I think at best we have mixed results when it comes to picking winners and losers.
Yeah, and another interesting point is about Uganda. I didn't know it was a bill passed until like a few weeks ago that it passed overwhelmingly that there was a call for intervention in Uganda by the American people. That was a bit of a surprise. The news was kind of trying to say it was a backroom deal, but no, there was a college group that came over to my school, and they were pretty much just showing off the bill, saying, oh, we presented a bill that called the U.S. government to intervene in Uganda, and this is completely justified.
Well, so the example of the Lord's Resistance Army, in looking at this, yes, it was a bill presented to Congress based on what I understand with regard to the situation. I would have signed the legislation also based on what I understand, that this is a marauding band of about 300. It's a finite group. That over the last several decades, they may be the worst terrorist group on the planet over the last 20 years, being directly responsible for tens of thousands of murders, mutilations, rapes. This was legislation that, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was signed about a year ago. I think I would have sent in a volunteer force. And dealt with the whole 300 marauding band. 3 countries asked for our intervention. Apparently, this meets all of what I would consider to be the criteria for a humanitarian intervention. In my opinion, our national security is not being threatened at all by the Lord's Resistance Army. But this is a situation where I, as president, would not want to stand by and watch this come down. And in all of my life, growing up, I can't think, there may be other examples that meet the criteria of the Lord's Resistance Army, but I can't sit here and tell you that there are. This apparently, to at least my understanding, and maybe it's because I've kind of tried to immerse myself in it a little bit, really is humanitarian action that will make a huge difference in the lives of millions of people.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, wonderful.
Catherine.
Gary Johnson, I was wondering, as most Americans favor legalization of cannabis, but only 38% of Republicans agree, how do you plan on targeting the other 68% of Republicans who are not so libertarian?
Well, Catherine, you and everybody else saw that last Monday Gallup came out with a poll that has 50% of Americans right now supporting legalizing marijuana. That has never happened before. So that's very, very positive. So this is an issue that, taking the stand when it came to legalizing marijuana in 1999, I advocated legalizing marijuana. Let's control it. Let's regulate it. Let's tax it. I think right now, well, first of all, what I found in my experience is this is an issue that does really well when you shine light on it and when it gets cussed and discussed. So that is happening right now nationwide, and the issue only advances as a result of that. And when it comes to Republicans, for the 62% that may not agree with this, I'm telling you, Republicans just as easily move as anybody else, that it is an issue of education, and I have found really, really good response from Republicans. I have not found this to be a partisan issue, actually. I found this to be an issue of education that more we talk about it, the better it does.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Drink? James, Albuquerque.
Oh, I just wanted to know, how will legalizing marijuana boost our economy and lower the crime rate?
Well, getting the speaking the obvious, getting the whole economy of marijuana above board as opposed to below board. I'm in favor of enacting the fair tax, so marijuana would get subject to the fair tax from the federal level. Also, it's estimated that if you tax this at a state level, that it would probably generate in the vicinity of $10 billion as a tax statewide. And then couple that with the fact that currently about half of everything law enforcement, the courts, and the prisons do is associated with drugs in some way. Redirecting all of those resources to what I call real crime as opposed to victimless crime will really have a positive impact on our daily lives. Burglaries that currently occur in a home or a car getting burglarized, if you walk out and have your car, if your car was burglarized overnight, the only reason you would call the police is so that you could have a police report to give your insurance company. We legalize marijuana. I'll go so far to say that police might actually come out, investigate your car burglary, and may actually find out who did it, as opposed to going out and trying to catch individuals selling small amounts of drugs. And you know what? They've gotten really good at doing that. We're arresting 1.8 million people a year in this country. We now have 2.3 million people behind bars. Those 2.3 million behind bars, the biggest category of offense is drug offense. So this would be a big redirect on what we spend our money on when it comes to law enforcement, the courts, and the prisons, to really go out and address real crime as opposed to victimless crime. Matthew Ryan.
How are you doing, Governor?
Great, thank you.
So I just had a quick question here for you. When we look at the economy, and you talk about reducing the federal budget deficit, two of the most prominent areas of the budget are defense spending and some welfare programs, especially Social Security. Now, both of these areas are popular and very politically polarizing. So how do you go about reducing spending without, alienating too much of the country in the process?
Well, let's start with Social Security. It's not cutting Social Security. No cuts to Social Security, and Social Security as a problem is really relatively minor compared to Medicare. Medicare is really the big problem out there. But Social Security, very simply, is a system that needs to take in more money than what it pays out. So without raising taxes, and by the way, if we implement the fair tax, Social Security will come out of the fair tax. You won't have to pay it as an employee. Your employer won't have to match it. it will come out of the fair tax. But Social Security, without raising taxes, we need to raise the retirement age. We need to perhaps implement means testing, which very simply can be fair, in that if you're making a certain amount of money and you've paid in a certain amount of Social Security, maybe you shouldn't be able to take out more money out of Social Security than what you paid in if you're making a certain amount of money. That would be a really fair means testing, in my opinion. Thirdly would be to change the escalator that's built into Social Security from the wage index to the inflation rate. That would make it solvent way off into the future. And then lastly, have kind of opt-in, opt-out options for you and I to be able to self-direct some or all of those funds in Social Security. I don't have any definite plans for how to do that, but I think as this campaign goes on, there may be a lot of viable plans out there that I just don't understand as well as I will understand. But take all those in combination, there you have Social Security. Medicare and Medicaid, big, big expenditures. As governor of New Mexico, I reformed Medicaid in New Mexico. We took it from a fee-for-service, and this is Medicaid, health care to the poor. We took Medicaid in New Mexico, changed it from a fee-for-service model to a managed care model. We improved the delivery of Medicaid in New Mexico significantly and saved a lot of money. I believe if the federal government were to have block granted New Mexico a fixed amount of money, 43% less than what we were currently spending, and done away with all the strings and the mandates regarding Medicaid, that I could have overseen a successful delivery of health care to the poor in New Mexico. I maintain that I could have done and could do today the same thing with Medicare, which is the delivery of health care to those over 65. Medicare is a fee-for-service model right off the bat, so just changing that to a managed care model would save a lot of money. But the only way we're going to deal with these two issues is to give them back to the states. 50 laboratories of innovation and best practice that would do just that. In my opinion, there would be spectacular success that would get emulated because we're really competitive as states. I think we would also see some spectacular failure that we do everything to avoid. But the notion that Washington knows best, the notion that Washington top-down has the answers, there's no way that can work. That is a model that just can't work. So give Medicaid and Medicare back to the states, cut it 43%, and let them innovate to make that happen. Based on my experience, I could have made that happen. Defense. The operative question is, can we provide a strong national defense for this country and cut military spending by 43%? My answer is yes, a resounding yes. The operative word here being defense as opposed to offense, as opposed to nation building. So when you talk about a 43% reduction in military spending, you're talking about those in uniform, you're talking about the civilians that support those in uniform, you're talking about nuclear warheads from 2,300 to 500, you're talking about research and development. Look, this is the 21st century. Let's develop weapons for the 21st century, not for wars fought prior. This is also in the intelligence area. This is also getting out of the conflicts that we're currently involved. And one cut that I would never, ever advocate for when it comes to the military, when it comes to defense spending, are the obligations that we have to veterans that have been wounded or have been damaged as a result of their service. And by damaged, injured, seriously injured, whether that be psychologically or whether that be physically, that we have an absolute obligation for the rest of their lives to meet our obligation. And I'm not talking about cutting any of that, that's something that needs to be taken care of. So that's the military side of it. Medicaid, Medicare, military spending, Social Security.
Hey, that sounds good.
Corey.
Hey, Governor Johnson, how you doing?
Great. Thanks for coming on.
Well, first of all, I'd like to say thanks for running for president. I know it can't be fun. You're doing a great job of spreading the message
Some
of liberty.
days it is.
But I'm in my third year of law school, and just about every time I've taken a class and read cases, almost every rule or regulation that's come up has been, I felt, unnecessary and misguided. And I would like to know what you would do as head of the executive branch to maybe cut back on some of these unnecessary rules and regulations. And then also, if you had any thoughts about how you go about picking a Supreme Court justice if you had the chance, and even if you had anyone in mind at this point. Thanks.
So Corey, great point that needs to be made. As governor of New Mexico, I ran the government. I appointed the heads of all the agencies. I appointed all the boards and commissions. In essence, I controlled all rules and regulations. I will tell you that rules and regulations in New Mexico got better on a daily basis and had a basis in common sense. One of the things I did as governor of New Mexico is I had an open door after 4 policy in which I met with any citizen in the state the 3rd Thursday of every month, starting at 4 o'clock in the afternoon and going till 10 o'clock at night on 5-minute increments. In doing that, I came face to face with all sorts of rules and regulations and government atrocities, if you will. But it was always my notion that by fixing it for one, I was probably fixing it for hundreds. But it made a difference. I made a difference as governor of New Mexico, rules and regulations. Without exception, we were able to change rules and regulations for the better. And I will also tell you, government has a role. There are some bad actors out there. There are truly bad actors out there that, but for government, I am convinced that they would continue to be bad actors, polluters, unscrupulous business individuals that really are out to take advantage of people. And government has a role to protect us from those people. So my rules and regulations didn't have anything to do with putting bad actors, giving them more opportunity. If anything, it was about cracking down on bad actors and not cracking down on you and I as law-abiding citizens that when it comes to government really just adds a whole lot of time and a whole lot of money to everything it is that we do in our lives. Everything I did was about reducing that. As President of the United States, same thing. Don't underestimate how rules and regulations can get better on just a regular daily basis. I'm also pledging to do an open door after 4 as President of the United States when it comes to waste, fraud, and abuse. And we'll add rules and regulations to that also. What rules, what regulations are out there that I might be able to change from a common sense standpoint? And when you do it on 5-minute increments, you know what? You get right to the heart of what it is someone wants to communicate. Very effective. Like I say, I'll make a difference in that category. Supreme Court justices. The criteria for I don't have anyone in mind, but the appointment of a Supreme Court judge should be on the basis of that Supreme Court justice making judgment on the Constitution based on original intent of those that wrote the Constitution. What was the original intent? What was intended in what was written, and that would be the criteria for appointment.
Great. Thanks for taking my question.
Thank you. Victoria.
Can you hear me, Gary?
I can.
Yes, can you hear me?
I sure can.
What I wanted to know is what types of issues you're willing to use executive orders to make changes with. If you can't get Congress to move along the things that you want moved along, that the people want, which things would you be willing to use executive order on?
Well, there isn't.
If you have anything in
that-
mind.
Well, the number one thing that comes to mind are drug laws, and of course, if I'm elected president of the United States, I'm advocating legalizing marijuana. So what does that say with regard to drug laws and Congress and let's change the laws? I think that's shouting we want change when it comes to drug laws, but executive orders to, and actually it doesn't end up to be an executive order, but it ends up to be controlling all the agencies and appointments, and so I can make the scheduling of marijuana as a class 1 narcotic something that will go away right away. And by right away, whether that time frame is 2 weeks or 2 months, it'll go away as soon as it can go away. And what I want to stress here, Victoria, is that this is what government should be doing, is making government more common sense. So if you want to pose another suggestion for me on an executive order, I'll be glad to fire off right now, whether or not I'm in or out of making that happen also. But
nothing in particular, just curious.
Yeah, don't underestimate that power that you're talking about right there to be able to implement very, very positive change.
Great. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Thank you. Lee. Up to the microphone. Can't hear you. Okay, got to read. Okay, will do. Will you be able to prevent the Department of Justice and the federal government from suing the states due to illegal immigration? Will you be able to prevent the Department of Justice and the federal government from suing the states? Yes, I think that would come under the purview of back to states' rights from the very get-go. And I do have what I consider to be comprehensive immigration reform, which in my opinion, a lot of that rests with the states. Am I in support of the legislation that Arizona passed to deal with illegal immigration? You know, I'm not in support of it at all. I'm a critical of what they did, but I think they have every right to do that as a state. I don't think it's going to address the problem. I think the problem can be dealt with in much more cost-effective, meaningful ways. Don't build the fence. I think that would be a waste of resource. I think we should make it as easy as possible for immigrants that want to come into this country to get a work visa, not a green card, not citizenship, but a work visa that should entail a background check and a Social Security card so that applicable taxes would get paid. And by the way, implementing the fair tax, taxes won't be an issue because everybody will pay the fair tax. You're going to have to consume, whether you're illegal, legal, a visitor, everybody pays the fair tax. And then don't discount either for a minute all the problems on the border that have to do with the prohibition of drugs, and by legalizing marijuana, arguably 75% of the border violence with Mexico goes away. It's putting the disputes in the courts rather than having the disputes played out with guns. And when I look at all of my Republican opponents right now running for president, all of them seem to be advocating more guns in a situation that is being dictated with guns, as opposed to the real root problem with border violence, and that is prohibition. And we've seen that in our country's history with the prohibition of alcohol, where the mob rose to power. I think we have the same situation here when it comes to drugs and drug violence. Sam.
Hi, Governor. When I bring your name up to a lot of my friends, they tend to say, oh yeah, he's the pot guy, right? Why do you think that's the issue that you're associated with the most, even though it's an eminently reasonable issue? Why do you think that's the case, and do you think it hurts your cause at all for people to view you that way?
Well, Sam, last week, the Gallup poll, 50% of Americans support legalizing marijuana. Amongst the universe of politicians, 0% of politicians support legalizing marijuana. Now, there are a handful that do, but they statistically don't even make up 1%. So I am arguably the most outspoken critic of our drug laws now for almost 12, 13 years that I have been more outspoken than any elected government official. I'm the only one. I hope that people look at my stance on the drug issue as indicative of my stance when it comes to every single issue, something that I promised New Mexico voters, and that was, look, I'm going to put issues first, and it doesn't matter what they are. Let's find out what the issue is. Let's find out what the problems are, and let's solve them. And so let's make politics the last consideration. Let's make politics a non-consideration. Let's just actually deal with the problems that we have in an honest and open, transparent way. So if that's what I get labeled as the pot guy, I hope it gets followed up with, and that's my candidacy here for president, I hope it gets followed up with, yeah, you know what? That's the way he looks at every single issue. There are no sacred cows when it comes to Johnson. He's just going to simply tell it like it is, and let's deal with the problems that we have.
It's a good answer. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. And by the way, for everybody watching right now, every single question is a good question. So I never say, hey, that's a great question, because you know what? There isn't a one that's not. David.
Gary, I am concerned about the deficit and the manner in which it's increasing. How will you impact cuts in foreign aid, subsidies, UN dues, and maybe bringing the troops home and equipment from foreign lands?
I would bring the troops home tomorrow. I'd bring them home tomorrow. I'm opposed to foreign aid completely. We're borrowing, printing money to the tune of 43 cents out of every dollar that we're spending. I think it's important to distinguish between foreign aid and military alliances. Military alliances being key to being able to reduce our military expenditures by 43% and still maintain a war against terror, which I think is real, that there are threats out there. But other countries need to share in this as opposed to us taking it on completely. I'm going to submit a balanced budget to Congress in the year 2013. When it comes to the United Nations, I think there's 43% largesse built into the United Nations, just like there is in a whole bunch of departments. So when it comes to the United Nations, I'd be looking at a 43% reduction in expenses to the United Nations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey,
Gregory.
Can you hear me?
Sure can.
Okay, so here's my question is that I know many of my friends who are college-age kids, they really don't seem to care about politics because they don't seem to think that any politician represents them. So as the leader of America now, what will you do for my generation who's supposed to be the future leader?
Well, Gregory, I think, and this was governor, as governor of New Mexico, I'll tell you what I saw political favors that, and we're talking payola here, Republicans, Democrats, both. Make a contribution to my campaign, and I'm going to give you special favors. I'm going to grant loopholes, whether you're an individual, a group, a corporation. Look, I'm kind of for sale. Well, as governor of New Mexico, nothing was for sale. The whole notion was to create a level playing field where all of us had access to the American dream. And the American dream, really, if you're willing to work hard and innovate and be honest, there isn't anything that you can't achieve. I think what's really important for young people right now to understand, and not that they don't and not that you don't, is that we're going to be left with nothing if we don't fix the fact that we're borrowing 43 cents, printing money to the tune of 43 cents out of every dollar that we're spending. We're going to find ourselves in the midst of a monetary collapse where money is worth nothing, and that is not a good scene. That is, when you look at Russia and what happened in Russia after their monetary collapse, they are never going to recover in our lifetimes from that. That's what we're looking at unless we fix this. And your generation was not responsible for this, but mine is. And the irony behind all this is that this is imminently fixable, but it's got to be fixed, and it's got to be fixed now. Andrew.
How would you respond to, I know you've already addressed this about running as a third party, but how would you respond to a nomination from AmericanSelect.org?
Well, and maybe I'm not as familiar with it as I should be, and you can chime in. But are they going to issue a nomination? For example, could the nomination for president from AmericaSelect.org also be the nominee of the Republican Party? Based on my understanding, I think that would be really, really positive. I mean, from my understanding of AmericaSelect.org.
Apparently, one of the participants here says yes, they can.
Yeah. So
someone says they can here.
To me, that just functions as a gigantic endorsement from really informed individuals. So I just view that as very positive. I would view that very, very positively.
So, but other than that, if you don't get the Republican nomination, then you would not accept the nomination from American Select to run as a third party. Is that
right.
correct?
My plan of action is to win the Republican nomination. My plan of action is to actually get elected, believing that you're going to have to be one of the two parties. Not that you can't make some really important statements running as a third party, but I don't see being able to win as a third party. And I did get to serve 8 years as governor of New Mexico, talking the same line that I'm talking tonight. And I think what speaks volumes is the fact that I get reelected in a state that's 2-to-1 Democrat, arguably being the biggest penny-pinching governor in the country. And I base that on the fact that I may have vetoed as many bills as governor of New Mexico as the other 49 governors in the country combined. I'm looking to be called out on that statistic and be told that, no, the other 49 vetoed 100 more than you did. Well, I'll take that criticism, but I don't know if that's even there. So I vetoed a whole lot of legislation, said no to government, that government wasn't the answer to all of our problems, that government shouldn't be passing laws telling us what we can and can't do in the bedroom. And I think people of New Mexico saw that that was a positive thing, and I get reelected, like I say, in a state that's 2-to-1 Democrat.
Thank you. It's very frustrating seeing you be excluded the way it is.
Well, right now, CNBC has a debate next Wednesday in Michigan, and they've set their criteria for the debate, and I qualify. I just qualify, period. So we contacted CNBC to verify that I am getting an invitation because I qualify. And the qualification, very simply, is that you have to be at 3% of any national poll ever conducted since the beginning of this. And I was at 3% in a Gallup poll in May, so I qualify. But I'm saying this because CNN won't get back with us to verify that I am invited. Maybe they're sitting down right now and they're going to instigate the Gary Johnson rule, a new Gary Johnson rule. I'm not sure. What I'll also say is significant, I think, is that in Florida, just 2 days ago, the Florida Republican Party determines who is on the Republican presidential primary, who's in the primary in Florida. That is determined by the Republican Party of Florida. I am one of the 9 that they have allowed to be in the primary in Florida. Sam Russo.
Governor.
Yes.
Wondering what you would do to encourage manufacturing to come back to the United States.
So what will you do to encourage manufacturing being brought back to the United States? Sam, I really think that implementing the fair tax, which throws out all existing federal tax, throws out the IRS, throws out income tax, throws out business tax, throws out corporate tax, I really think that that lays the groundwork for hiring tens of millions of Americans here in this country, because why would you start up, grow, nurture a business anywhere in the world other than the United States, given a zero corporate tax rate environment? Couple that with an immigration policy that allows for immigrants that want to come into this country and work, so that if you are a manufacturer and have your manufacturing in the United States and you're dependent, let's say, on very cheap labor, that you would actually have that force available too. And I have not found that immigration really is about cheap labor. It's just about filling need that American business does have. So if you set the stage right, and I believe that what I just said sets the stage right, does that guarantee that manufacturing jobs will return to America? No. But I think from a logical, common sense standpoint, there's going to be a lot more manufacturing happening in the United States, if not a reversal of manufacturing leaving the country as opposed to coming into the country.
How are you doing again, Governor? I just had a quick follow-up question. You know, we always talk about the issue of church and state. How would you generally deal with it?
Generally, that there should be a separation between church and state, period. That's what should exist. So I'll just say that as governor of New Mexico, I respect the many religious beliefs that people have, and it starts there, that you respect the beliefs that others have, that you do unto others as you would have others do unto you. And look, leave religion, get religion out of government.
How far would you take the idea of getting religion out of government?
What do you have any specific examples that you're thinking of that could be taking place that aren't?
Having looked at a lot of the politics and some of the issues people have been upset about recently, and semi-recently, one of the ones that was often thrown about was the phrase "under God" in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Well, so this is this is not an issue that I would be out there leading on either. I don't want to mislead. But under God, am I correct in that under God was injected in like 1953 in the Pledge of Allegiance?
During the Red Scare,
What's that?
I said I believe it was during the Red Scare, during the whole communist fear.
Yeah, so I think it was 1953 where that was put into the Pledge of Allegiance, and so when we hear that as Americans, we kind of bristle, thinking somehow that under God goes back to when this country was founded, when the reality is that's a fairly recent new phenomenon. So I just Matthew, I'm not going to lead with that kind of issue. I think that it ends up alienating people on both sides. You can just look to me to not implement those kinds of initiatives to that I would be instigating that kind of discussion. Rolling it back, like I say, I think there are bigger fish to fry.
That's good to hear. Thank you, Governor Johnson.
Cliff.
Hello, Governor Johnson. I work in the chemical industry here in Louisiana. How do you hope to overhaul EPA?
Well, just sitting here right now, and of course, I love the process. I love being governor of New Mexico. I loved understanding all the minutia of all these issues and then making a decision on these issues based on really understanding the issues and taking politics out of the equation. I really think that there's a 43% largesse built into the EPA, that if we can get the 43% out, that we can return to the notion that that important rules and regulations do get set, and that there are bad actors, and I saw this in New Mexico also, but for the EPA, maybe polluters in New Mexico would still exist and still continue to pollute because nobody had shut them down for the decades prior to my taking office, and I did shut down some of those bad actors. So I think there's a 43% largesse built into the EPA that if you can take it out, it'll be an agency that functions more in line with protecting us from bad actors that really do exist.
Absolutely, to protect against bad actors, but what about restricting and overregulation in business?
Yeah, and then Cliff, I'll just reiterate what I said earlier, is don't underestimate the fact that as President of the United States, in a nutshell, I control the Environmental Protection Agency. I appoint the head of the Environmental Protection Agency, and so when it comes to a rule, from a rules and regulations standpoint, rules and regulations can get better on a daily basis as opposed to getting worse. And when I say worse, I mean rules and regulations that end up costing us time and money and don't make any difference at all with regard to health and safety. You know what? If it's health and safety and it can be made better, that's one thing. But if in the name of health and safety, all you do is you add time and money to have to basically just deal with baloney coming out of government, these are things that can be fixed and will be, like I say, based on my experience, on a daily basis, you can make all this stuff better.
All right. Thank you a lot.
Thank you. You're going to get a little propaganda here. For those online, I would love for you to all go to the website, GaryJohnson2012.com, and I'm going to also shamelessly pitch the fact that if everybody online tonight were to donate $25, why we could raise some money that further this cause also. And I shamelessly pitch that. Hey, I just appreciate everybody on and everybody that's taken their time this evening. Back to questions. Hal, Hal Jarvis, I don't see on the screen, but I'm going to read your question, which is, to coin money, regulate the value, do you believe that dollars should be backed by gold, silver? How do we get back to that? Yes, I do. And, Reagan commissioned Reagan appointed a commission that encompassed, I guess, Greenspan and also Milton Friedman, among others, to study that very issue, and it was competing currencies and how you could bring that about. I think I have a pretty good understanding of how you could bring that about, and I would certainly sign legislation to make that happen. I would promote that kind of legislation. Brownsroft.
Hello, Governor Johnson. Yeah, I used to use it. You can call me Brian. My question is, I think it was Eisenhower that warned against the military-industrial complex, which essentially is, heavy.
Brian, I really apologize. On this end, you came across garbled, but you do have your written question, which is, aside from your plans to end our global interventions, how specifically would you rein in the military-industrial complex? Talking about a 43% reduction in military spending. That's uniformed personnel. That's support for those uniformed personnel. That's intelligence spending. That's ending our foreign involvement. That's research and development. That is cutting our nuclear warheads from 2,300 to 500. Why do we need to blow up the planet 9 times when 5 might do? It really is across the board, and it all comes under the notion that we can provide a strong national defense for this country and still cut military spending by 43%. The operative words being defense as opposed to offense, as opposed to nation building. And keep in mind, if I were elected president, wouldn't that be the American people shouting that this is what they want done? And my intention would be to represent those that elected me to president, and this is what I'm saying to get elected president.
Hello, Governor Johnson.
John. Yeah.
How's it going? I have a question about, I'm doing good. How realistic do you think it is that Congress would be able to get around the idea of ending the Federal Reserve or backing our money by gold and silver again?
I don't think they're going to end the Federal Reserve, but I would sign legislation banning the Federal Reserve. But and I know that you probably understand this. Ending the Federal Reserve is not the end all. We end the Federal Reserve, Treasury could still print money. Countries around the world, and before we had a central bank, we were printing money before we had a central bank. So Treasury could still print money. Ending the Federal Reserve would really bring about... Go ahead.
Is it possible? How realistic would it be giving that power back to Congress? Would Congress be able to get the power to print its own money again? Or would they be willing to do that?
Well, the printing of money really is a function of Congress over-authorizing expenditure as opposed to revenue. So a balanced budget amendment would address printing. We need to stop printing money. However, but what we need to do is stop printing money. Ending the Federal Reserve will not end the practice of printing money, because Treasury would continue to print money, and they would print money because Congress would continue to appropriate more money than we actually generate from revenues. That's what needs to stop, and my promise, I'm going to promise to submit a balanced budget to Congress in the year 2013. I'm going to promise to veto expenditures that exceed revenue. Under that scenario, I'm going to suggest to you spending will be less than any other scenario that you can come up with. And if you can come up with a scenario where we'd have less spending, I'm going to change my position and adopt whatever it is that you have. Back to the Federal Reserve. Federal Reserve's original mandate was price stability. Added on to that was unemployment or employment, which I think are at odds with one another. Federal Reserve central bank should be about a strong U.S. dollar, not a weak U.S. dollar. And that's what we have. We have 0% interest rates because, hey, let's face it, if we didn't have 0% interest rates right now, we would be in the midst of that monetary collapse because of the debt that Americans hold and can't repay. Thank you.
Me again. Are you in favor of auditing the Federal Reserve, and how could you curb it from printing money?
Well, yes, absolutely in favor of auditing the Federal Reserve, and that's this whole notion of transparency and the fact that the Federal Reserve should be transparent. So, look, abolishing the Federal Reserve, in my opinion, brings about 100% transparency, which is a good thing. So I would be in favor of abolishing the Federal Reserve. How can you curb it from printing money? Look, very simply. In this case, they're printing money to cover the rollover of treasuries. I mean, we can stop. So we implement the fair tax. The fair tax is going to be revenue neutral, but among other things, it's going to also really promote savings. So it makes Americans the holder of debt as opposed to the government printing money. That goes a long way. It's one thing to address the ongoing deficit. It's another thing to address the deficit that we have. So we need to first start off by balancing the budget. That's how we start the process of quitting printing money. On top of that, is the rollover of all the existing treasuries are going to end up being covered by printed money unless we as Americans save more. The fair tax does that, in my opinion.
Thank you.
Thank you. James.
Hello. Basically what my question is, okay, we have a lot of veterans that been to through the Cold War, through Afghanistan, in Iraq, coming home, being injured, getting injuries during the service, and they're getting out, getting compensations, getting pensions. And this is, for example, a person is 100% disabled. He gets rated at 10%. When he's totally unemployable, then when he appeals it, the appeals are going to take 1 to 3 years. Meanwhile, the veteran loses everything. We have a high rate of veteran suicide. And I would like to know if there's going to be any type of reform on veterans' benefits.
Well, I'll just tell you, James, in back to my promise, I promised to submit a balanced budget that's going to have 43% less spending in it as an overall number. I am not going to cut pensions or benefits for veterans by a penny. When you look at the overall sacrifice that all of us are going to have to be a part of if we're going to have a country going forward, I'm not asking veterans to sacrifice anything that they're currently receiving, but in that context, maybe there aren't any raises, but there certainly are no losses.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. David
Hello.
Wilkinson. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just wondering what your thoughts are on the future of NASA since the space shuttle, isn't happening now.
Long term, we need to inhabit other planets for the survival of the human race. I mean, that's long term. And I don't want to sound flippant on this at all, but long term, at some point in the very, very distant future, the Earth becomes uninhabitable. Over the short term, and I'm talking now about the next several decades, certainly we're not talking about increased funding for NASA, and we're talking about believing we can be viable and make progress, but so much of that's going to hinge on what I think ends up to be private delivery of space, of scientific projects into space by the private sector as opposed to NASA, and that we do have to get smarter, and that right now, over the short term, we're not going to end up being in a position to explore other planets if we don't save our country first here from a monetary collapse. So I think NASA is going to be in the 43% category along with everybody else.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Or not so great, but now we're back to let's save this country. Let's save this country and let's have something for the future. And believing that if we don't address it, that it's going to go away, that's not my candidacy.
Okay, well, great. Thank you for your time and good luck. Thank you.
Thanks. Brian.
Hello, Governor. Hopefully the microphone's working a bit better now.
Much better.
As my question states, I'm interested in the internet freedom, internet regulation, just generally. Could you elaborate or discuss specific plans you have for that? Thank you. Also, good talking to you, Governor.
I do not want to get involved in regulating the internet. I don't want government involved in. I really believe in free markets. I think internet has and will deliver that notion of free market in ways yet unseen that are very positive to mankind. And I just don't want to see government intrusion into the internet. I don't see it necessary to this point, and I don't see it going forward.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
How's it going, Governor? How's it going?
Thank you. Good, thanks.
As my question asks, do you have a plan to stimulate job growth or any intention in investing in fields such as energy initiatives?
You know, Ryan, I would keep the bet that we have on the green space when it comes to energy. But the bet that we have on the green space right now is that every 5 years, energy becomes, and by green space, wind, solar, biofuels, geothermal. The bet is that every 5 years, all of these areas become 100% more efficient, much like semiconductors. That's not happening. It's not even coming close to happening. But if it were to happen, in 15 years, the green space could be providing 15% of our energy needs. We have to rely on traditional sources. That would be oil and gas. Oil, if we were to responsibly drill on our own territories, which I think responsible is something that can take place, but if we responsibly drill on our own territories, in 15 years we could be at 50% production of our own consumption, which is also significant. We need to be utilizing natural gas more. In a free market, I'm a free market guy when it comes to energy. So in a free market approach to energy, I don't know if we build any new nuclear facilities, given that no private underwriter is going to really underwrite the liabilities associated with nuclear. I'm open to seeing the government in a role to do that. It's an exciting notion to me that we have zero carbon emission from nuclear, and the new electrical generation facilities are a one refuel for 50 years of life. To me, that's an exciting, really exciting prospect. So we've got to rely on our traditional. Go ahead.
I was going to say, do you believe the federal government should maybe promote drilling here? Because I live in an area in Ohio where it's a big debate on whether they should drill up here in the northeastern part of Ohio for natural gas, and they're talking about it could sustain us for up to 20 years. So it's very big debate around here.
Yeah, no, Ryan, I do not want to see government involved in that process. But if drilling for natural gas in Ohio is a viable economic possibility, the private sector is going to be lined up to do that. And that's the reality of whether or not that does or does not happen, not government.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hello?
Clarence, yeah.
Hello, Governor. One of your major talking points in news when you do interviews is your 2 vetoes that were overridden by the New Mexico legislature. I'm just wondering, what were they?
You know, one was a bill to establish quotas for healthcare beds in long-term, in elderly housing facilities. I can't even tell you what the bill really meant. When you can't even understand the bill that's being presented to you, why is it something that's needed? That got overridden. I can't even tell you what the bill said, really. It was an incredible waste of time. It was like, I think it was the reason why other bills weren't vetoed, because that was my response to New Mexico citizens when this crucial piece of legislation was overridden. I don't think there was anybody in New Mexico that could even tell you what it was. The other bill that was overridden was actually pretty darn significant, and it was the last budget bill. It was the budget for the last year that I was in office, and basically Republicans said, Governor Johnson, you're not going to even be here. We're tired. We're tired. We're not going to take on the fight anymore. You're not going to have to deal with the problem. We are, so we're overriding your veto, and thanks for the good work, but we're tired.
All right. Thanks for that clarification.
Thanks.
Hi again, Governor. I'm going to get slightly philosophical here and ask why libertarians are in the minority. I've got a lot of smart, really smart friends, really compassionate friends who really do make an effort to understand libertarianism, but they still reject it. It still doesn't sit well with them. And I'm sure you've had those conversations with people too, and it's kind of frustrating to try to get them over the hump. What's your thought on that? What are we missing? What do we have to do?
Sam, I have a sense that, and I'll speak for myself, why am I a Republican as opposed to a Libertarian? I guess it's the notion that I'll just cite as an example the notion that I think there are truly people in need, and that without the government providing that need, I don't know as they get it delivered any other way. I'm in that camp. I just think we've stepped way over the line when it comes to the notion of people in need. That people in need really don't include the number of people that we currently are delivering welfare services to. That needs to be scaled back tremendously. Give that back to the states. I think you make that happen. I think that libertarians have unfairly been branded as the party that wants to legalize drugs. Maybe going forward that won't be so much of a stigma, but that'll be credit for actually being giving thought to the issues of the day that we face. I love the libertarian philosophy. I remember in the 5th grade being given a book in the 5th grade that was about libertarianism, and it was one of those books that said after you read it, you need to pass this on to others, because in the 5th grade, it was so simple to understand, and in the 5th grade, it was philosophy that I completely understood and believed in at that time. So it's really one of education, I guess, and I just believe that at some point the Libertarian Party really is going to have its day. I'd like to move the Republican Party in the direction of becoming libertarians.
So just quickly, what's the outreach then? Obviously, all of us here probably are already on board. What's the method of outreach?
So Sam, I led off tonight by describing, I think this is the method of outreach, is I think the majority of Americans describe themselves as classical liberals. Classical liberal is defined as somebody who believes in less government, period. Classical liberal is somebody who believes that the best thing that government can do is just leave me to make decisions that only I should be making, not the government. I think the majority of America, I think 60% of America agrees with those statements. I think that libertarians really carry that banner more than Democrats and more than Republicans. So it's just, I think it's a matter of time, and I think libertarians are coming into more and more prominence or acceptance of what it is they're saying as being really easy to understand and applicable in all of our lives. I just don't know if in my lifetime a libertarian is going to ever get elected President of the United States. And to my knowledge, I don't think there's ever been a libertarian, and correct me if I'm wrong, an individual who has run as a libertarian get elected to even Congress, much less Senate, much less governor of a state.
I don't think it'll happen in my lifetime either, but maybe. Thanks so much, Governor.
maybe in your lifetime, the Congress, Senate, maybe president, but as a Republican with libertarian leanings, you know what? I happen to think that's really in vogue right now, and for all the right reasons. None of our philosophies have to do with being in vogue. It's just that it seems like right now awareness is lending credence to what we should be doing, and that happens to have that happens to have a basis in less government and empowerment of individuals.
Okay. Have a great night.
Great. Thanks. Thanks everybody for being on tonight. I do want to make a pitch. The notion that I believe that I still can win this race. Part of that reality, or part of being able to make that happen, is raising money. So donating $25, donating $1 makes a difference. I joked before I started this race that if every American who ever smoked marijuana donated $1 to this campaign, why we would probably have about $120 million right now. It is that simple. I would love for those of you online to go to the website GaryJohnson2012.com, and like I say, this is participating in the process. This is an opportunity to go to Washington yourself. I had a Mr. Smith Goes to Washington experience as governor of New Mexico. I recognize that there are a lot of Mr. Smiths out there, but I'm one of them, and that's the intention here running for president. Look, one person can make a difference. I did it as governor of New Mexico, and I can do this as president of the United States. And so with that, I'm just going to say good night to everybody. Thank you all so much. Really fun from this end. Thank you.